when I went to work for Cuban at AudioNet, he had this mantra, and it was like a sign on the wall, and it said, "Make love, not war." And it was really inspiring. So I took it a step further, and I said, "Love everybody you do business with," and then I kind of modified it to "grow everyone you do business with." And all of a sudden, I began to see the world was opening up to me.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen. My name is Michael T. Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host Tyler Kelly. And today is a very special episode. We are actually at the EQ Leadership Lounge at EQ Leadership Labs the day before the MDMC conference starts. And today's a very special episode. I'm really excited to have someone who I consider to be a mentor and a friend, and that is Tim Sanders. So Tim, thank you for being here. We're excited to have you. Welcome.
Stoked to be here with you, Michael. You're one of my favorite people too, buddy.
Oh, it makes me feel good.
Well, for those that are tuning in, Tim is a New York Times bestseller with 5 books, a 6th one on the way.
Yep.
And originally worked with Mark Cuban at broadcast.com. Mark sold that company to Yahoo, and then you transitioned over to Yahoo. Started out in business development, worked your way up to become Chief Solutions Officer, and while you were there, you wrote your first book, Love is the Killer App, which became a New York Times bestseller and allowed you to do what you do now, which is travel the world as a consultant, a mentor, an author, a speaker, and you're just killing it out there.
Well, thank you much, buddy. And you're one of my favorite people too, Tyler. You two guys, we got to get together again, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Maybe next time when you're here a little longer. So
yeah, right.
I want to start by talking about Love is the Killer App, because I run into a lot of people that say, like, I love that book, or that was my favorite book, or that book like changed a lot of things for me. So tell us, like, what inspired you to write that book and just the process that led to that book being written.
It was like 2 things happened at once, okay? So the more significant thing that was happening is when I went to work for Cuban at AudioNet, they changed the name to broadcast.com right before the IPO. He had this mantra, and it was like a sign on the wall, and it said, "Make love, not war." And it was really inspiring. And his philosophy is we're going to be the people that really come from a place of caring about our customers, okay? They're not happy with something, we tear up the invoice. They expect something they thought they were promised, we over-deliver, right? We're going to do right by customers. We're not going to fight them every step of the way like most companies do. And when I got into that culture, it empowered me. And when you get empowered, you get energized. And so I took it a step further, and I said, love everybody you do business with. And then I kind of modified it to grow everyone you do business with. And so I started to practice it as a sales rep. So when I go out, you got to imagine the time, 1997, 1998, the world was changing like never before. The internet was happening, and my client base originally was universities, then I shifted to retail. So as I go out and talk to retailers at wherever, JCPenney, Neiman Marcus, whatever, as they say on Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, they were looking for answers, right? We're searching for answers. And so I became mentors to prospects and customers about how the world was changing, and all of a sudden I began to see the world was opening up to me. I wasn't just talking to some new media manager at Neiman Marcus. I was having lunch with the late, great Stanley Marcus, and I realized that the secret to success was to give. So I created this little training program, and when I say little training program, it was like a 90-minute orientation speech for the new people we were hiring, because at broadcast we were hiring people right and left, and it was called Gonzo Business. Business makes you feel good about yourself. And I kind of started to do that, and when they sold the company to Yahoo, one of our executives, Stan Woodward, had told Jerry Yang, you got to hear Tim's Gonzo Biz thing. So they invited me to go to a Yahoo meeting after the acquisition. I gave that speech at a regional sales conference, and it just took off. So I was doing that training program. And then I started to do it in the local community in Dallas before I left, and this is the second part of the story. And so I was speaking to a real estate group about how the internet would change their prospecting, as well as how they marketed houses. But then for the last 15 minutes, as you saw me do today, I talk about love, because that's how I'm going to end it, right? And so this lady who was invited to be there by a speaker bureau agent, she comes up from the back of the room. She had this big hair, really expensively dressed. She had a $1,000 bag, and she comes up and she says, "Darling, you have a fantastic book in you. That love thing, I just think that's a book, honey." And I go, "Well, I'm not a writer." She goes, "You don't have to be a writer, you're a communicator, and you have an idea." And I said, yeah, I wouldn't know the first thing about doing that. And she says, well, I do. She goes, I found Tony Robbins.
Wow.
I found Dr. Phil McGraw. I championed Dr. Stephen Covey. I'm all of their literary agent, and it was Jan Miller, one of the most famous literary agents in the world. So I met with her the next week. She said, I'm going to find you a writing partner, who was Gene Stone. He's great. Many of you might know his book, Forks Over Knives. And he taught me how to think about a book and organize my constructs so it wasn't just, gonzo. Mm-hmm. And in 9 months, we had a book deal with Random House Crown, and it was a big deal. And that's how my career started. And Crown trusted my agent, and we stuck with the name Love is the Killer app, is what it turned into, and that's it. And the book came from a very pure place. And to this day, when I talk to other people that want to write their own Love is a Killer app, I tell them, I say, write what you know and tell them how you did it, and be generous and be honest, and speak to them the way you want to be spoken to. And I really feel like we captured all of that in that book.
So in the book, you talk about 3 keys: sharing your network, sharing your knowledge, and sharing your compassion.
Yeah, these are your intangibles, right? So we have these intangible values, and I mean values like things of value that we can share that are different than our tangible values. So the tangible things I could share with you are time, which is extremely tangible, right? Money, I could give you resources. I could share permissions with you by looking the other way if I'm going to be a boss that just wants you to like me. I can give you tangibles, but they run out. And quite frankly, they don't empower the other person. They're actually quite controlling when you think about it, right? Because sometimes generosity can be controlling. But the intangibles work the other way. I give you knowledge. You usually give me feedback. The feedback improves my knowledge. Sometimes you give me knowledge in return, but I don't expect it from you. But I end up gaining a lot of knowledge when I mentor other people. Same works for your network. If you're smart about how you put people together that should meet and get out of the way, your network will explode. And the more you give, the more you grow, right? And then compassion works exactly the same way, and that is, as you show compassion to people, your desire that they do not suffer, your hope that they find happiness and success, they change. We are deeply influential on other people when we show them compassion, just like we are when we show them hatred. We're deeply influential. So I kind of figured that out. And more importantly, guys, I figured out the sequencing for this code. That's why it's an app. Sequencing, the front end of it is sharing knowledge. Okay, I can share knowledge with anybody before I even have a relationship. I do it all the time. I share knowledge with strangers. I'll share knowledge with whoever's sitting next to me on the plane on the way to Chicago later on today if the opportunity presents itself. And I consider that a way that we generate mutual trust. And it's like a building block. And then now that I'm a little bit deeper in with you, I'll share my network with you. Because if I share my network with somebody prematurely, it's going to be a bad match, especially for the benefactor. Because in networking, there's a benefactor and a beneficiary oftentimes, right? And I want to be very smart about my network. And I want to make sure I get to know you a little bit. So I share knowledge, and we begin to kind of, build, as they say. And I share my network with you. And now we've really, come a long ways. And all through the sequence, I'm showing you my compassion. But there's a point where compassion becomes the center of our relationship, and that's the end of that sequence. And that's where we deeply care about each other. And knowledge and networks were platforms to get us to that place. Because I'd like to think that the best friends I've ever had in my life I've met in my professional life. Not just who I went to high school with or my neighbors, and that's greatly expanded my universe.
Talk a little bit more about that compassion idea. Like, what does that look like for somebody? Because I think in a lot of our relationships, maybe we don't get there, or it's hard to get there. How do you get there, and what is that?
I think I'm really, y'all know I'm a country guy, so I'm really struck by this song that Keith Urban sang the other night at the Academy of Country Music Awards. He sang this song called Burden. And I think about the idea that compassion comes from our awareness of the other's burden and our ability to minister to that burden, to hold that burden with them, for them, and to address it. So I guess, Michael, you got to be open to understand the suffering. So sometimes, like even as a leader at a company, some people suffer from a deep sense of no meaning, and they need recognition. Sometimes people need to feel like they're in a system that's fair at work, maybe around compensation. or transparency. That's their burden, and they carry it around, and it creates unnecessary suffering. And a compassionate leader solves that, and they don't ask, how am I going to do it? They realize that you can do anything through creativity. People say, well, I can't be completely transparent. Yes, you can. Or at least you can be transparent enough to lift that burden, okay? So compassion comes from the awareness of suffering, the commitment to solve it as best you can if it's addressable, and your willingness to use creativity and putting ego behind you. And I'll tell you one other thing about this, because it's kind of like present, and I really want to capture this. Compassion comes in flavors, okay? It's not just about caring. It's about accepting. It's about turning down that velocity of that fault-finding machine. It's about forgiving. I was talking to a woman right after my talk today, and we were talking about collaboration, and she says, I'm trying to bring these two parties together in a community project, and they've had a history, and they fought, and we want them to forgive each other so we can move forward. And one group said, I'm not ready. And she asked me, what do you say to that? And I want to share this with you. I've been in that situation where I've seen two people that need to get along, and they're warring with each other. And usually one doesn't want to forgive the other, and they'll always say, I'm not ready for that, right? And so the answer I gave her is the answer I'd say in this situation. When someone says that to me, I say to them, the stakes are high. Every single day the two of you don't get together, this bad stuff is happening. And I will do anything within my power. I will sell the shirt off my back. I will move heaven and earth to give you what you need to give forgiveness. But the only thing I can't afford is more time. And if you tell me what you need is time, then you are telling me that your personal feelings are more important than the stakes. So I'll give you anything you want. But if you tell me it's time, you're just telling me you're more important, and you're trying to control the situation. And I'm telling you that answer works. So I know that's off base a little bit,
yeah,
but it's super important to the concept of compassion and the flavor of forgiveness.
So you were here today speaking at the EQ Leadership Labs, keynote speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you see me tell Jonathan right before I went on stage? I said, like literally right before they turned the music down, I said, this might be a good time for us to renegotiate the terms of this relationship.
Yes.
Got him good too.
I'm sure he was shocked at that one.
I had leverage on him. I didn't renegotiate. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
But, one thing that I've found, I think you're one of the best speakers in the world.
Aw, thank you,
And
buddy.
not just because you're my friend, but because I truly think you are on a level all your own, top tier. But part of being a great speaker is being well-versed in many different areas, and you're a voracious reader.
Oh, dude, I'm reading. I'm so like, tell me. I happen to be carrying around the book I'm reading right now.
Okay.
So I do deep dives. So part of my learning pattern that I've kind of built up is when I develop a deep curiosity about a topic, I review dozens of books, and then I do the weekend academic article, typical Google thing. But I like books, and I can tell you why if you want. They're long form. They require a lot of commitment. They give you complete ideas. So I am deeply interested right now in what I refer to as success longevity. Like, where do we find the energy to excel for a very long time in a highly repetitious manner? Like, how does a singer like Tony Bennett sing a song 5,000 times, but on the 5,000th time it's like at the first? Like, where do you get that motivation? And I find that there is a lot of research on where this comes from. Like, where do we find the fuel and the difference that good versus bad fuel makes on our relationship life and our continuity in life? So I'm doing a deep dive, and I read a book. Books lead to books, right? So I went back and for the second time read Dan Pink's Drive, because that was I like it. It's a very nice pop psychology, and that's not an insult, because Dan is good at making things simple that would generally be academic. It's a great pop psychology book on as leaders what really drives people, and the point in his book is that money is the worst way to truly produce intrinsic motivation. And he talked about three things people really want. They want autonomy, they want a sense of purpose, and they want to be challenged, right? So those are the three simple ideas that he says we need to do. And so he mentions this book within his pages by the authority on intrinsic motivation, Dr. Edward Dechy. He's at University of Rochester School of Psychology. I'm going to actually meet him in 2 weeks because I've got some gigs there, and I'm going to look him up. So I'm reading his book, and I'm digging through this, and it's a read, buddy. But I don't know. You can hold this up. I'm still practicing the cliff and tag system I talked about in Love Is the Killer app. It's a memorization / cliffing technique. Cool things I've read on the inside pages, project-related stuff on the outside pages. Other books that I need to buy based on reading this book right here. I'm going to go buy a book called The Concept of Confidence. Yeah, The Concept of Confidence. But anyway, I'm digging into this and where people find intrinsic motivation, and basically they find it from autonomy. And nothing really causes a person to fall into a state of flow like getting to choose what they do. And that we as leaders, the takeaway I'm already getting, is that we as leaders need to co-produce the jobs that our people are doing. And we need to find clever ways to help them have some sense of choice about the task. And it's going to make a big difference on their performance, especially when it comes to issues like quality or inspiration. Wow. So it's a little takeaway there.
So as you talk about, like, you're a person that reads a lot, and I'm curious, when we go back to the idea behind Love Is the Killer app and this idea of love, and a lot of stuff that kind of we get when we read and consume stuff that you've put out, is the idea of abundance versus scarcity and things like that. What early on influenced you in that way? Like, what in your upbringing, or what kind of put you down that path?
My upbringing definitely impressed that on me. I grew up on a farm in eastern New Mexico, a little city called Clovis. Billy, my grandmother, raised me. There were 7 books. Bible was the 8th. I won't even call that a book. It's the Bible. But the other 7 were books like Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, a couple of books by Dale Carnegie, of course, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, another book called The Magic of Believing, another book called The Magic of Thinking Big. And the thread that ran through them all was believing there was enough to go around even during the darkest times, and that we always have the power to choose to believe there is enough to share. Because if we don't, how do you explain those people with rags that find some way to go to the street and still give to those worse off? How do you explain that? Well, it's a state of mind. The great philosopher Gide once said that scarcity is an illusion, And Pinto often said that what he wanted to do is go live like the beggars in the streets and eat like the beggars in the streets and sleep with nothing. And then he'd realize in that moment, this is it. This is as bad as it gets. And so that is deeply ingrained in my psyche. But where the match was lit is my wife Jacqueline, who y'all have met and hung out with. She is clearly the better half. She read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People 1996-ish, 95, 96. Couldn't stop talking about how I should read that book. She just thought that I would just have such a relationship with Dr. Covey, who, by the way, Jan Miller, introduced me to, and I got to know him before his death. And when I read that book and I came across that passage where he talked about how people are scripted in scarcity, how it holds them back, makes them compete when they should be helping other people. And then he said this thing that just got me. The abundance mentality comes from a deep sense of self-worth and confidence where one believes there is enough to share. And I said, I'm worth it. And I believe it. And it framed Love Is the Killer app. Love Is the Killer app would not be possible without the lucidity of me understanding the high contrast challenge of the abundance mentality breakthrough and the scripting of scarcity that is more or less default to us, and absolutely the thing we share in common with the beasts. Like every time I see my little Coco, little 16-year-old poodle, when he comes out for food at 3, he is scripted in scarcity. You move that bowl, you will get bit, okay? But I'm worth more. I don't mean worth more than my dog, but I mean as a human being, I'm evolved more, and I can have abundance, and I don't have to be scripted in scarcity. So that's a deep set thing, and it's so important to entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs get it because they live in scarcity. I mean, like material, it's like an entrepreneur, as I said today, an entrepreneur is a person who has a vision that he or she cannot complete on their own. So lack is part of their existence. So it's easy for them to deeply get scripted in scarcity. And it leads to a lot of bad things.
Well, I love how you say scarcity is an illusion. What we've always found is that if you feel like you're short in one area or another, that's the perfect area to give away.
Let's go back to Gide.
Yeah.
Gide said, that which you cannot release possesses you. Right? When I was in a couple of mentorship lunches with Stanley Marcus Jr., wonderful man, he once told me that was a practice he would have during recessions, because they joke it's called needless markups. Neiman Marcus is a luxury retailer. It was always the first hit by a recession and the last to come back. And he was in his late 80s when I met with him, so he'd been through this dance that we were going through with the dot-com crash. He'd been through it before. And he said, during these times, I take the thing I lack and I give it away, and then I go back to work and I have a real appreciation for it. Because he says people don't have time management problems, they have time appreciation problems. He said, so for example, during recessionary times, he often loses a lot of his resources, assistance, help, and it's like he can't quite make time ends meet. He said, so what he'll do is double down on his mentorship, spend an extra 2 hours a week mentoring people, because then when he get back to his office and realize what a difference he made in 2 hours, he would viciously go after his calendar and turn this meeting down and take an hour-long meeting and say we can do it in 15 minutes, because it taught him the value of time, but he never would have learned it if not in the act of giving, which then leads to Viktor Frankl. Right? So, Dr. Viktor Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, which inspired Dr. Covey to write 7 Habits, where he said that the meaning of life will show up, but only in the act of doing something good. And it's your job to notice it. But I love that idea, and it does.
Earlier you said when you started writing Love is the Killer app that like the world was changing dramatically that time in the late 90s, and it's continued to change.
The velocity of change is nuts.
Yeah. So what is coming up, or what's happening now that entrepreneurs either, for one, that you can get excited about, but also might be a challenge to entrepreneurs out there in the world?
Okay, that's a really good question. I'm going to answer it 2 ways. So trend-wise, we must become experts on artificial intelligence and machine learning, and very quickly. It's exponentially bigger than the internet in terms of its disruptive capacity, as well as its ability to transform the world to make it a better place. And there is not a business, and there is not a leader that shouldn't feel a sense of urgency to deeply understand artificial intelligence and machine learning and what it means, and how they can employ it, how they can protect themselves from it, how they can be part of a community of discussion around it. I just can't emphasize that enough. And I'm shocked at how late so many people are to the game. I've seen it before. I mean, people were late to e-commerce. This is not just like e-commerce, okay? Amazon is not to be afraid of. Amazon is a very big, successful company. Walmart was a very big, they still are, but you know what I mean. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is coming, and it's big. That's the first answer. The second answer, I'm seeing a disturbing trend in startup community, and the disturbing trend is outsourcing of technology. Now, I have done 14 board advisory projects where I sit on boards. And in the very beginning, when a startup got its seed money, and then they raised their venture round or whatever, they used that money to hire coders. And sometimes when they exited, their value, it's called an acqui-hire, was mostly based on the quality of the engineers that were under their employment that they could retain, right? And that's changing, because what's happening now is you're having, because it's so easy to have an app built by describing it, writing it down on a piece of paper, and having a third party do it, you're seeing people get funding that have no technical background, so they outsource the whole technology, and they fail. Because, and this is nothing against business to business outsourcing providers of whatever. I have many friends who do this. But listen to me, when you're a startup, people need to bleed for you. They need to worry about every penny. And quite frankly, only employees have that capacity. And when you outsource, you're going to run late on your launch. It's not going to meet your conceptual demands, and you're going to fail. Your investor's not going to get what they thought they were going to get. Ain't nobody in their presentation ever tells the investor, oh, and by the way, you give us $500,000, we're going to take $300,000 and hire some company somewhere, and they're going to build it all for us, and what we're going to do is go out and raise the next round. That is not a company, okay? So I know I'm going on and on about this, but I think we need to think about the most critical work that needs to be done to launch our product, and either have it as part of the founding team, or or hire it with our earliest capital and preciously retain those people. We got to get back to that very quickly.
You're starting to get to St. Louis more often, which is,
I am. I love
is
this
a good
place,
thing.
and I love the community. I love Uni City. I love the Grove. I just love St. Louis. I'm gonna visit more places and eat more great food.
Well, we love having you here. In closing, what would be your top piece of advice for somebody that just, as an employee, just wants to get ahead, as an entrepreneur wants to, do that next big thing, just like that core piece of life advice?
Increase your capacity, your ability to give other people valuable assets. Learn things that are important. Gain experiences that other people would value and transfer. And as you increase your capacity, make a real commitment to feed that favor economy. And what I mean by favor economy is listen, meet new people, make deals to help. Expect nothing in return other than that they grow from the experience and pay it forward. Because if you feed that favor economy with value, good things are going to happen. You're going to weave a collaborative web that no problem can, withstand. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest piece of advice. So get out there and make relationships, but please understand there is a difference between being a super connector and a networker, okay? I'm not talking about shortcuts. I'm not talking about trying to meet someone who's going to change your life. I'm talking about connecting people that should meet with value. And if you take that perspective into the market, you could be a business development guy like I was, sitting in a chair every day smoking the phone, and you're going to get lunch with Stanley Marcus Jr. someday, and it is going to have a profound impact on your life. It takes a minute. And as I said on the stage today, it takes good technique, because increasing your capacity and feeding the favor economy sounds easy, and it ain't. It's really hard, because you got a job to do already. So you're trying to increase your capacity on top of that, and then you got to go out and spend even more time feeding the favor economy. You've turned off reciprocity, so you're not going to directly gain anything from it. You better master your technique. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I'll tell you is, as you gain power and influence and real value to give, help heroes. The takers will stand in line and take everything you're willing to give them. But the takers of the world, they're more in number than the heroes, the givers. And we got to band together. And a mentor, by definition, if you go back to Greek mythology, helps the hero with a gift for his or her next leg of the journey. Emphasis on the word hero. So I just really want to focus on the idea that this should be a big part of how you hire, how you build your collaborative web, who you choose to give your intangibles to. I want you to look for the heroic qualities in people, and I want you to encourage them to do the same, because I think that's what makes the world go around.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I think you answered my question, is how do you decide who to give? You just answered that for me, so.
Give to givers, man.
Yeah.
World's all about give and give.
So Tim, final question.
Yeah.
How can people get in touch with you, buy your books, connect on social media?
Go to timsanders.com, and you can link to my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my Facebook there. Or better yet, just email me. I'm email@timsanders.com.
Awesome, Tim. Thank you for being on the show. Grateful to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate
your influence. Thank you. For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you're in St. Louis, visit us on a Thursday night. Details at vencafstl.org. And connect with us on social at We Are Slam or at Venture Cafe STL. Thanks for listening.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come.